everybody, it's Jennifer J. Welcome back to Moving Forward. I've been gone for just a little while, so I haven't been recording. I was in South Asia trekking the most beautiful countryside, you guys. The Himalayas are very, very gorgeous. If you ever have a chance to go and see them, I hope that you will. The people there are so very kind, also very genuine and just loving and kind and welcoming. So it was quite an adventure for me. I had a great time and I picked up a few new subscribers from there. So welcome to my new subscribers. Today is going to be short. I did just want to hop on here because it had been a couple of weeks, I think, since I've put up a new recording, and so I will get back on track now that I'm back and I'm trying to get rested. Goodness, it was 30 hours of flying, and we lost Friday going over there, but we had 2 Saturdays coming back. So I'm just trying to get back on the right time zone and get my body adjusted, but wanted to hop on here at least for a minute and share something with you. The First Lady at my church, at Pilgrim Rest Baptist Church, did her first official sermon. So she's preached some really good sermons. I've heard her before, but she has officially become a pastor, a minister, I should say. She doesn't pastor her own church, but she has officially become a minister. And so she has finished her education on it, and she did her official first sermon. And so that's what I'm going to go over with you today. And it is out of the book of Numbers. That's going to be Old Testament. And it's chapter 22 and 23, but it's chapter 22 verses 1 through 12. And then in chapter 23 verses 13 through 20. So that is a lot of text. So I'm not going to read it to you. I hope that you'll go back and read it for yourself. I will tell you the story. It is in Numbers, which is going to be, really close to the front of your Bible. It's one of the first 5 books. But in this story, it's when the Israelites had moved in on King Balak. And so the king was like, there's a lot of people. There's a lot of them, and there's not as many of us, and they could overtake us, and I don't like that. And so he sent for Balaam. Balaam was a prophet, and something that Lady Mackey brought out was that he was a prophet for profit. So in other words, he did it for money, but he still had to say what God said. So he wasn't against getting paid for his prophecies, but he also still had to do what God said. So that was key. And so Balak sent for Balaam and said, I want you to come and I want you to curse these people because they outnumber me and I'm scared of them, and I need you to put a curse on them so that they won't, overtake us. And so he says in reply, I can only do what God says, but I'll come and I'll do whatever God says. And so he comes and he blesses the people. God tells him, you can't curse them. They're my people and they are blessed. And so he can't curse them. And the king doesn't like that answer. So he takes him to another spot and he builds altars and he sacrifices to God and he says, now curse them. And, Balak goes and listens to God, and God says, you can't curse them. You got to bless them. So he goes back and tells the king, I can't curse them. So he goes the third time, he takes him to the outskirts of their camp. And he says, there's just a portion of the people. We're getting closer to the camp, but they're not all here. You can just see the outskirts of them. Just curse this group of people. And he builds 7 altars and he sacrifices the animals. And Balaam says, I can only do what God tells me. And so he goes and God says, they're my people. I bless them. You can't curse them. So he blesses them again. And Balak gets really mad and he says, you've blessed them these 3 times and I've asked you to curse them. And he said, I can only do what God says. And what she was bringing out was God's promises. Her sermon was on God's promises. And she said, God entered a relationship with the Israelites and he promised to protect them. And she said his promise wasn't fulfilled till Joshua. So he gave the promise in Exodus and all through those other books. So it's Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua, through all those books until his promise was fulfilled. but he never left them. And she said something I really liked that she said, sometimes we can't trust him from January to February, but they trusted him all those years. And he said he would protect him, and he did. And so even though this king wanted to destroy them and wanted to curse them, God didn't allow it. And so he said, your favor might make someone want to take you out, but if you've got God on your side, he's in your corner. He's not going to allow that to happen. And so she also said, when your enemies are coming at you, they can only do what God allows. So, the enemies were coming at the Israelites. They didn't even know it, but Balak had taken Balaam and said, curse them for me. But God had protected them. Even though they weren't even aware of the danger, God was protecting them. And so when your enemies are coming at you, just know that God's protecting you. God's protecting you. And keep your hand in God's hand. He will keep his promises. He'll protect you, and the promise is on the way. So their promise took a long time to be fulfilled, but God protected them the whole way. And he's going to protect you too. So he's got a steady protection, and he's got a strong protection. She said his character doesn't change, and he doesn't lie. He's not a man that he should lie. That's what Balaam told Balak. God's not a man that he should lie. He doesn't change his mind. So she says, tell the enemy about your God and cling to God's character. Cling to the things that you know are true. God will never leave you nor forsake you. So cling to what you know is true. And then she said, just lift up your hands and say, Lord, get it off. Stand still and know that he's going to fight for you. So whatever it is, she said, just lift up your hands and say, Lord, get it off. So she used a little story about her son and some bugs in Houston. And he was trusting his mama to get it off. But God is even bigger than our mama. And he can get things off of us that we can't get off of ourselves. So if you've got something on you, if it's depression, if it's loneliness, if it's financial burden, if it's job loss, if it's grief, whatever it is, you can just lift up your hands to God and say, Lord, take it. Get it off of me. And he will. He loves you. He will never leave you or forsake you. And even though it might seem like you're going through a very tough time, the Israelites had traveled for 40 years. It might have seemed like a really rough time. Really rough time. But God never left them. He never quit on them, and he's not going to quit on you either. He hasn't forgotten you. He sees you. He knows what you're going through. He wants you to trust him. And I know that sometimes that can be hard. I am living proof. I know. If you've watched this video series from the beginning, then you know how many times I was like, God, tell me again, make me sure, confirm it again and again and again and again. I asked so many times. If you haven't watched from the beginning, I would encourage you to do so. You will need to go up to videos in the top tab of your smartphone, and then if you click videos, it'll take you to all of them instead of just on the home page. I think you just get 5 or 6, but you can get all of them. Scroll all the way down to the very first one and start watching them in order, because my whole story is there. And you might laugh at me. Some of those early ones are pretty funny. I don't know how to edit, so all the bloopers are right there. I thought I could edit stuff out, so I said cut and then restart. But I couldn't end up cutting it out, so it's just all there. But anyway, it's fine. You might get a good laugh out. It might be a good comedy show for you. But the story is very true and very real and very miraculous. So I hope that you will watch it, even if you get a good laugh out of it. And then just know that, even though I had those doubts and I had those questions, I know my God. I know how strong he is. I know how big he is. He created the Himalayas that I just got to trek through. They are so magnificent. He created everything, you guys. We saw the moon one night. The moon, it was a full moon, and it had the biggest ring around it. And I knew that that was like ice crystals, that it was, the glow of the moon was shining on the ice crystals. but it was so beautiful, and it's not something you see all the time, at least in America. We don't see that all the time. Anybody that was with us were like, I've never seen that before. It was so gorgeous, and God created all of that, and He created you, and He knows what you have need of, and all He wants is for you to put your hand in His and trust His promises. So Lady Mackey was talking about the pinky promise and how she does that with her kids. But if you want to watch that, I will try to get it attached to this episode so that you can watch it. It was really good, and I hope that you'll even listen to the music at the beginning, because a lot of times I'll skip through the music to get to the sermon. The music was phenomenal. You guys are going to want to enjoy that too, and just praise God with me for that. And then read Numbers chapter 22, verses 1 through 12. And if you want to read all the way through chapter 23, verse 20, otherwise if you want to skip, she used 22, 1 through 12, and then 23, 13 through 20. But go back and read that story and write down how many times Balak had to ask Balaam to curse the people, and how many times did Balaam go to God and seek his advice. And then he followed through and did what God said. And that's what we need to do. We need to follow through and do what God says, even when it's hard, you guys. Even when it's hard. Moving 1,200 miles away from my family was hard. It was hard, you guys. But I don't regret it for a moment, because I know that He had such a good plan and has such a good plan. And so even when it's hard, do what He says. You hear His voice. If you're His sheep, you hear His voice. You know what He's telling you. You know right from wrong. You know if you need to confess sin. You know if you need to turn away from sin and go a different way. You know if you should be in the Word more, be in prayer more, be going to church more, not just watching online, but actually going physically to a church and getting involved with the community of people there, which God definitely in His Word tells us to do. So whatever it is for you, if you would like prayer about it, comment. I would love to pray with you. But go, be like Balaam, seek the Lord, and do what He says. Talk to you later, y'all. Bye-bye.